Good day, this is Zahid from Filingstack Accounting Software. In this video, I'll be discussing Filingstack Accounting Software. Filingstack Accounting Software is an online accounting software application available at filingstack.com. Once you've signed up and created an account, you can thereafter log in. To log in, you can click on the login link. Once you've entered your email and password, you can click on the login button. This will then log you in. The page that will show once you log in is the info page, and this page shows all the companies or businesses that you have added onto your profile. To add a new entity or business, you can click on the Add Entity link, and on the Add Entity page, you can enter the business's details for the business that you'd like to add. In this case, I'd like to add a demo company called Medical Institute. For the company name, I'll name it Medical Institute. For the financials type, I'll choose IFRS SME. For the address, I'll put in a random address. For the industry, I'll put in medical practice. And then for the financial year end date, I'll put in the financial year ending February 2025, starting on 1 March 2024. And then the previous year end date would end on the 29th of February 2024 and starting on 1 March 2023. Once we've entered the financial year start and end dates, as well as the other details, we can then click Add Business. If I go to the info page, this will then add the business for me if I haven't already added it. In my case, I had already added this business. So the business is shown. And if I click on the business, it would then select the business. Once I click on the business's name, it would redirect me to the dashboard page where I'm presented with a menu of options and links. If I click on Process Bank Statements, this will take me to the accounts page. So initially, when I add a new company, if, for example, I'd like to add the bank statements for this company, I can click on Process Bank Statements. Once I'm on the accounts page, I can then add the bank account details for the bank account that I'd like to upload. In this case, I have a sample bank statement that I'd like to upload, and so I can click on Add Bank Account. For the bank name, I'll call it ABC Bank Limited since that's the bank name on the bank statement sample that I have. The opening balance on the bank statement is 2,560 rands, or depending on the currency you may be using, you can enter the amount over here. And then the date of the opening balance for me would be February 2025. So I'll put it as 25th February, and I can then click Add Bank Account. I can then proceed to allocate the remaining transactions. So for example, service fees can go to the bank charges account group. And then, for example, if I'd like to allocate any further transactions, I can do that as well. So for example, if I know that a certain transaction is a fee income item or fees that were received, I can allocate it to the fees account. We do have a feature that's available that will automatically allocate transactions. So we have two features available for automatic allocations of transactions. One is auto allocate by prior allocation. So if there was a prior year or prior years and I had allocated transactions previously, I can click on auto allocate by prior allocations, and this will then look at prior allocations and allocate the new transactions based on the prior allocations. In this case, since it's a new year and a new company that I just added, there aren't any prior allocations. However, there is another option available, which is AI auto allocate. This uses AI to automatically allocate transactions. So I can click on AI auto allocate, and this now will allocate these transactions for me. So as we can see here, it says transactions allocated, and we can see a plane ticket has been moved from no account to travel and accommodation. This scam has been moved to medical expenses, SASOL to motor vehicle expenses. So all of the transactions have been allocated. The AI auto allocate button and the auto allocate by prior allocations buttons only allocate transactions that have no account. If I had already allocated a transaction to an account, it wouldn't allocate those transactions. We can then review the allocations to make sure they are correct. If I go to page 2, we can see rent has been allocated to rent expense. If there are any transactions that need reallocating, we can reallocate them. And for example, if I'd like to put checkers to a drawings account, I can do that. Once I click save, this will then save all the allocations. So with these AI auto allocate functions and the auto allocate by prior allocation function, it helps me to allocate transactions. There may be some transactions that may need to be reallocated. Uh, However, it makes it much easier to allocate the majority of transactions. Once all the transactions have been allocated, I can then go to the trial balance page and I can view a automatically generated trial balance based on the allocations and the transactions that have been uploaded. I can export the trial balance to CSV if I'm importing it onto, for example, another software that I may be using, or to save it locally on my computer, I can export it to CSV. I can also view each account and what's in each account. So, for example, if I click on this fees account, it would take me to the ledger page. And if I click on the plus icon, I can view all the transactions that have been allocated to the fees account. If I click on a line on the ledger page or a transaction on the ledger page, it would then redirect me to where that transaction was posted. So, for example, in this case, it was a bank statement transaction posted on the accounts page. And so it took me to the accounts page. If I click show all, it would then show me all the transactions that I uploaded. Thereafter, I can view the income statement based on the transactions uploaded. In this case, since I only uploaded 1 month's transactions, it only shows in the February column. However, if there were multiple months uploaded, it would show me month-on-month comparisons for each month on the income statements. I can then go to the balance sheet where I can view the assets, equity, and liabilities for this company financial year. Thereafter, I can view other financial reports, or if I'd like to add the next year's transactions, I can go to the accounts page, and the current year that I selected is the 2025 year. If I'd like to add transactions that fall into the 2026 year, I can click the Add Year button. Thereafter, I can choose the financials type, which is IFRS SME in this case. The financials period is 12 months, and the financial year end dates are already pre-populated. If I'd like to update it, I can over here as well. Once I click Add Year, this will then add a new year, which would be the 2026 year, and I can now upload transactions that fall within the 2026 year. So if I'd like to upload, for example, the sample bank statement that I have here, I can then convert it to CSV if it's not already converted. So I can go back to the accounts page and then go to the info page. Once I click convert PDF, I can then upload that sample bank statement and I can then convert it to CSV. Once the conversion is complete, I can then download the CSV file and thereafter upload it onto the accounts page. Once the PDF bank statement has been converted, I can now download the CSV file that has been made available here, and I can then save this file. Once it's saved, I can go back to the accounts page. I can click on choose file and I can then click on upload file. It's important to make sure that the bank account that is selected is the correct account, especially in the event that I have multiple bank accounts that I have added. If, for example, the business has multiple bank accounts, in this case, it is the correct bank account, so I can click upload file. Thereafter, I can select transaction date for column 1, transaction description for column 2, and transaction amount for column 3. As the transaction date is in column 1, the transaction description is in column 2, and the transaction amount is in column 3. Payments are recorded as negative amounts, and receipts into the bank account are recorded as positive amounts. The date order over here is year and day, so I don't have to change the format or this date selection for date order. I can then click import, and this will then import all of those transactions. I can then proceed with allocating each transaction. Since I have prior transactions that I have uploaded in the previous year, I can use this auto allocate by prior allocations button to allocate them based on the prior allocations that I had done for the previous year. So once I click auto allocate by prior allocations, this will then allocate all the transactions based on how I allocated similar transactions in the previous year. So for example, as we can see here, all the transactions have been allocated. If I sort by account group, I can then review them to make sure that they are correct. So let's save these first. However, it tells me that I need to select a plan. So if I click on the payments link, this takes me to the payments page where I can select a plan for the new year that's been added. So if I click select plan, currently there's no plan that has been added for this financial year. We did add a plan for the previous year. However, since it's a new year, we'll have to add a new plan. So in this case, I'd like to add the invoice starter plan to this financial year, which is a 2026 financial year. Once I click confirm plan, this will then confirm this plan. Once the plan has been confirmed, I can go back to the accounts page and click the save button. This will then save all the allocations. I can sort it by account group and I can then review the transaction. So for example, all the bank charges have been allocated correctly. Um, and then I can view some of the other transactions as well. So for example, I have some fee income items, and then we have medical expenses, motor vehicle expenses, as well as some salaries and wages, subscriptions, and other transactions as well. I refreshed the page to remove uh, that message that had showed since I didn't have a plan at that time, but now since I added a plan, I can refresh the page to remove that message. Once I'm happy with the allocations, I can then go and view the trial balance that's been automatically generated, as well as, for example, if I'd like to review all of the accounts and the transactions in each account, I can go to the ledger page and view the transactions in each account. So, for example, for bank charges, we have an opening balance because we had uploaded transactions in the prior year. So the closing balance for the prior year was negative 920. And then we have the movements for the current year, which is 2,597, as well as the closing balance for the current year. We can also go and view the income statement. And since we now have a prior year as well, it shows the comparative year or the prior year, as well as uh, a monthly income statement based on the months that I uploaded. So in this case, I uploaded just March and April, so only March and April will show. Another very useful feature that we have added is on the tax page, which is the provisional tax feature. So if I click on provisional tax, this automatically does a provisional tax calculation for me. So for example, over here, it tells me that I have uploaded transactions for 38 days and there are 326 days remaining. So what it will do is it will forecast based on the days uploaded and the days remaining, the expected amount at year end. And it will generate a profit based on those forecasts. Thereafter, I can, for example, select the entity type. For example, if it's a company in South Africa, the company tax rate is 27%. If it was a small business corporation, I can select that as well. In this case, I'll leave it as company. And for the provisional tax period, I'll select the first provisional tax as the provisional tax period. It would then calculate the tax based on those selections. I can then download the calculation to Excel or PDF